I'm John Walton. I'm a professor of Old Testament at Wheaton College, and my specialty is understanding the Old Testament against the background of the ancient Near East. All of these people in early genealogies of Genesis, living for hundreds and hundreds of years. Methuselah, 969 years. How do we read something like that? Well, if we try to read it in the context of the ancient world, it might lead us to think differently than how we just think in our world. So, for instance, we're aware of a piece of ancient literature called the Sumerian King List, and that records 10 kings who ruled before the flood, and their reigns were 36,000 years, 43,000 years, 18,000 years, a real youngster then. And so we see, again, great time periods involved. And one of the questions we have to ask is, are they using numbers the same way we use numbers? Now, I'm not talking about mathematical systems. I'm talking about rhetorical value. What exactly do they mean by those numbers? Numbers can be used rhetorically. We use them rhetorically at times. And so how do you tell the difference when a culture is using them rhetorically or when they're using them precisely as numerical values? And that's the tricky thing. Genealogies in the ancient world are not the same. They don't have the same function as the genealogies that we might do today. So we always have to be willing to make the cultural shift. I had a friend who was visiting Indonesia, and he went to a village, and a woman was speaking, and she was introduced as a 40-year-old woman, which he thought was strange because we'd never introduce a woman by her age. But he kind of registered in his mind. She was obviously respected in the community. He came back to that village 2 years later, and the same woman was introduced to speak, and she was introduced as a 50-year-old woman. At that point, his logic gear kicked in, and he said, wait a minute. Just 2 years ago I was here, and she was 40 years old, and now she's 50 years old. What's going on? And she said, oh, that has nothing to do with my age. That goes totally against our intuition. But she said that has to do with the status of respect I have within the community, and has nothing to do with how old I am. And so later that day, when my friend was introduced as a 50-year-old man, he was very honored by that, being only 35. Different cultures use numbers differently, and we shouldn't jump to conclusions by insisting that we must read them the same way they would be used in our culture. We have to try to understand how they might have used those numbers rhetorically.